Never thought I'd come back to Willow Street. Not after 18 years. Not after everything that happened inside this house. The paint had peeled off the porch, the roses in the front garden had withered, and the wind carried the faint smell of rain and nostalgia. It was strange how a house could hold both love and silence in its walls. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The wooden floor creaked beneath my feet, the same sound I used to hear when my husband, Ethan, came home late at night, humming softly so he wouldn't wake me. Only now, there was no humming, only echoes.
The air inside was colder than I expected. I walked past the hallway, tracing my fingers over framed photographs, our wedding day, Ethan holding me under the old oak tree, and the one of us in Venice, smiling like the world was ours. But that was before the silence began. Before he started keeping secrets. Before our marriage became a story of glances, not words. I moved toward the study, the one room Ethan never let me clean. He used to say, "Grace, some places need their own chaos." 18 years later, the chaos was still there. Books stacked unevenly, coffee stains on papers, and an old leather chair pushed slightly away from the desk as if he'd just left. It started with a sound, the click of an old drawer refusing to open. I tugged gently, and something inside gave way. There it was, a faded blue envelope tucked beneath a pile of tax documents. My name written on it in Ethan's handwriting. My breath hitched. I sat down, the paper soft and fragile in my hands. He had died 2 months ago. A heart attack, they said. Sudden. Quiet. Just like him. I hadn't cried at the funeral. I couldn't. But now, with that envelope in my lap, the tears came uninvited. My dearest Grace. If you are reading this, it means I never found the courage to tell you the truth. I am not asking for forgiveness. I just hope you can understand why I did what I did. 18 years ago, on the night you found me sitting by the piano and crying, I told you that I had lost a client. That was not true. What I lost that night was something far more precious. Something that once belonged to both of us. I paused. The paper trembled in my hands. His words repeated in my mind again and again. Something that belonged to both of us. What did he mean? I remember that night as if it were carved into my bones. Ethan never cried. Not even when his father died. But that night, I found him sitting by the piano, his hands shaking. He said he'd lost a client, his biggest one. We were struggling financially then, so I believed him. But the look in his eyes wasn't of a man who'd lost money. It was a man who'd lost something he loved. And for years, I carried that moment in silence, too afraid to ask, too desperate to forget. The rain outside had turned into a storm. I folded the letter slowly, placing it back into its envelope. He said, something that belonged to both of us. I stood up, pacing the room, my heart racing. Ethan wasn't a man of riddles. He was honest, almost painfully so. So why this secret? Why now? I glanced around the room, his desk, his shelves, the old piano in the corner. Something about it felt wrong. Like the house itself was hiding the rest of the truth. The piano hadn't been touched in years. I opened the lid and pressed a key. It still sang, faint and haunting. Then I saw it, a small latch beneath the music stand. Ethan always kept it locked. My fingers brushed over it, remembering how he used to play for me every Sunday morning. I reached into the drawer of his desk and found a tiny brass key taped under a book. The lock clicked open. Inside, a small wooden box. And inside the box, another letter. But this time, not addressed to me. It read, "To Anna." My heart stopped. Who was Anna? I sat down on the piano bench, staring at the envelope. The rain thundered against the windows, and the lights flickered. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I didn't know if I wanted to open it. But deep down, I knew. Whatever truth Ethan had hidden all these years was waiting inside that envelope. And once I opened it, there would be no going back. The rain outside had stopped. But inside, the silence felt heavier than thunder. I sat on the couch, holding that letter close to my chest. The fireplace had burned out, leaving only the faint smell of ash and smoke. My eyes moved back to the page. I could almost hear his voice as I continued reading. Grace, that night wasn't about work. I received a call from the hospital. A woman named Evelyn Carter had passed away. You never met her, but once, long before I met you, she was a part of my life. And there was a child involved. My hand froze. The words blurred in front of me. A child? I read the line again, slower this time. The boy's name was Adam. He was 5 years old when I last saw him. Evelyn never told me he was mine until it was too late. I tried to find him, Grace. I really did. But by the time I searched, she had vanished. The air in the room turned cold. I could hear my heart pounding like distant footsteps in an empty hall. Ethan, my husband, had another child. And he had kept it buried for 18 years. I closed my eyes, and my mind pulled me back to that night. The one he mentioned in the letter. The piano. The tears. I remember finding him sitting in the dark. His hands motionless over the keys. His face wet with silent grief. When I asked what was wrong, he said softly, "Nothing that time can't fix." And I believed him. I wanted to. But now, the truth had finally found me, 18 years too late. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains. But the world looked gray to me. The letter lay open on the table beside my coffee mug. And the words stared back like ghosts refusing to rest. I read the final lines. Grace, I thought about telling you every day. But every time I looked at you, I saw the woman who gave me a second chance at life. I didn't want to ruin that. If you ever find Adam, please tell him I never stopped thinking about him. I folded the letter gently, my fingers trembling as if they carried the weight of his confession. Adam. Somewhere out there, an adult man, my husband's son, was living with a truth he never knew. And I realized something deep inside me. I needed to find him. Not for Ethan. Not even for forgiveness. But for myself. I went back to the attic the next morning. The air was still heavy with dust and secrets. There were more envelopes inside that wooden chest. Each labeled with a different date, each addressed to Eleanor. The same mysterious name I had seen before. But this time, I noticed something different. Underneath the letters, hidden beneath an old photo frame, was a second envelope. This one was addressed to me. My name, Grace Turner, written in his familiar handwriting. I tore it open carefully. Inside was a single photograph. A little boy, brown hair, blue eyes, and a shy smile. Standing beside a woman with a soft face. On the back, written in pen, were the words. Adam, 2007. I pressed my hand over my mouth. He would be 23 now. I didn't sleep that night. I searched every corner of the internet. Old records, social media, missing persons databases. I typed his name over and over. Adam Carter. Nothing felt real until I found a small article from a local paper. A charity concert photo. The caption read, "Local musician Adam Carter performs at a hospital fundraiser." A musician. Just like Ethan. The same gentle eyes. The same smile. Without thinking, I picked up my phone. And called the number listed for the venue. A young woman answered. "Hello, this is Silverline Cafe." My voice shook. "Hi, I'm looking for a man named Adam Carter. He played at your concert last month." "Oh, Adam," she said cheerfully. "Yes, he's performing again this Friday. Would you like to reserve a seat?" I whispered. Yes, please. But what I wanted wasn't a seat. It was the truth. That night, as I folded Ethan's letter one last time, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time since his death, I wasn't haunted by what he'd hidden. I was driven by what I had to find. The paper trembled in Grace's hands. Each word she read seemed to carve a deeper wound in her chest. 18 years of silence, and now, the truth was whispering back through the ink of a dying man's confession. My dearest Grace, the letter read again. If you're still reading, it means you found what I couldn't say out loud. I wanted to tell you every night, but the words turned to ash on my tongue. I saw how much pain you were in, and I couldn't bear to add more. Grace's lips parted, her breath shallow. Her eyes moved slowly across the page, each sentence drawing her deeper into a truth she was afraid to face. Her mind drifted back to that night, the one burned into her memory. Rain tapping gently against the windows. The room dimly lit by a single lamp. Edward sitting by the piano, his shoulders trembling, his fingers frozen above the keys. When she asked what was wrong, he looked at her with those tired eyes that carried too many secrets, and said softly, "It's nothing, Grace, just a bad day." But now, she knew. It wasn't a bad day. It was the day everything changed. Grace's hands tightened around the letter as she read the next paragraph. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears. Grace, our son didn't die that night. The words hit her like a storm. Her knees weakened. The paper slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the ground. For a moment, the world went silent, only the faint ticking of the old clock filled the room. She picked up the page again, her tears staining the ink. They told us he didn't make it, Grace. I believed them. I held your hand as you cried, and I buried our future in my silence. But 2 weeks later, I found out, he was alive. A nurse, desperate and terrified, had sold him to another family. I tried to find him, Grace. I tried everything. But every door I opened led to another lie. Grace's body shook. Her breath came in short gasps. She whispered, "No, no, this can't be true." Her voice cracked, fragile, broken. She clutched her chest as if trying to hold her heart together. The grief she had buried for 18 years clawed its way back to the surface, raw and merciless. The letter continued, his handwriting growing shakier. I kept my silence not out of cruelty, but out of fear. You were fragile then, Grace. The doctors said another shock might break you completely. I thought I was protecting you, but instead, I built a wall between us, one that neither of us could cross. Grace pressed the letter to her chest, sobbing quietly. She remembered all the times she had caught him staring at old baby clothes, at the nursery they never used. She had thought he was just mourning, but now she knew, he was hiding a living ghost. Grace turned the last page, her fingers trembling. If you've made it this far, it means I'm gone. But I've left something for you. In the piano bench, where you once placed our wedding picture, there's an envelope. Inside it is a name. The family who took him. It's the only lead I ever found. Her eyes widened. She looked across the room, at the old grand piano standing in the corner, silent and dust-covered, its lid half open like a wound. The same piano Edward had played for her on their wedding anniversary every year. She stood, her legs barely holding her weight, and walked toward it. Each step echoed in the hollow room. Her fingers brushed across the wooden lid. It creaked softly as she lifted it open. Inside lay a stack of faded sheet music, and beneath it, something wrapped in yellowed paper. Her trembling hands pulled it out. An envelope. Sealed with red wax. Her heart stopped for a moment. On the front, in Edward's unmistakable handwriting, was a single name. Ethan Cole. Grace sank into the piano stool, staring at the name. She whispered it under her breath, Ethan Cole. It sounded unfamiliar, yet something about it struck a deep, painful chord inside her. Her tears fell silently onto the envelope. She held it close, her voice breaking. "Ethan, my baby." Outside, the rain began to fall again, just like it had 18 years ago. The house seemed to breathe with her, filling with the ghost of a past that refused to die. As the screen faded to black, the faint echo of a lullaby filled the air, the same lullaby Edward once played on the piano. The rain had stopped by morning. The house was quiet, too quiet. Grace sat by the piano, the envelope still clutched in her hand. The wax seal was broken now, the name Ethan Cole circled in her trembling fingers. Her eyes were swollen from crying, yet her heart burned with something she hadn't felt in years, hope. She whispered softly, "Ethan, if you're out there, I'll find you." Grace opened the envelope carefully. Inside, she found an old document, a hospital record, dated 18 years ago, and a torn photograph of a newborn baby wrapped in a white blanket. There was also a business card. The name printed on it read, Margaret Ellis, private investigator. Her heartbeat quickened. Maybe Edward hadn't stopped looking after all. Maybe he'd gotten closer than she ever knew. Grace picked up the phone, her hands trembling. The number on the card was old, faded, but she dialed it anyway. After a few rings, an older woman's voice answered, calm yet weary. "Margaret Ellis speaking." Grace swallowed hard. "My name is Grace. Grace Bennett. You worked with my husband, Edward, years ago. It's about our son." A pause. A long, heavy pause. Then the voice softened. "Oh, Mrs. Bennett. I was wondering if you'd ever call." Grace froze. "You know about him?" "Yes," Margaret whispered. "I was the one who told Edward the boy survived. He was adopted by a family in Ohio, the Coles. I warned Edward it might destroy you both, but he said he'd tell you one day." Grace covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. "Do you know where he is now?" Another pause. Then the answer. "Yes. I do." Grace packed only one small bag and boarded a train heading west. Outside the window, cities faded into fields, and fields into forests. She held Edward's letter close to her heart. Every station felt like a heartbeat, closer, closer, closer. As night fell, she whispered to the empty seat beside her. "I'm coming, Ethan, please, let it really be you." The town was small and quiet, a place where everyone seemed to know each other. Margaret had given her an address, 421 Willow Street. Grace stood at the edge of the driveway, her pulse racing. The house was old but warm-looking, painted cream, with wind chimes on the porch. She could hear laughter inside. A woman's voice. A young man's voice too, calm, deep, familiar somehow. Grace stepped closer, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The door opened before she could knock. A man in his late teens, tall, dark-haired, kind eyes, looked at her curiously. "Can I help you, ma'am?" he asked politely. Grace's breath caught. Her knees nearly gave out. That face. Those eyes. Edward's eyes. She whispered, barely audible. "Ethan." The young man frowned. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" Grace covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. She couldn't speak. Another figure appeared in the doorway, a gentle-looking woman with graying hair and a warm smile. "Is everything all right, sweetheart?" she asked her son before turning to Grace. Grace quickly wiped her tears. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disturb you. I think your son might be someone I once knew." The woman hesitated, glancing at Ethan, then back at Grace. "Would you like to come in?" Inside, the living room was filled with family photos, birthdays, school plays, graduations. And in one photo, Grace froze. It was Ethan as a child. Wearing a small silver bracelet. Her bracelet. The one she had tied around her newborn's wrist before the nurse took him away. Grace's voice broke as she whispered. Grace's tears fell freely now. She looked at Ethan, really looked, and every piece of her heart recognized him. "Ethan," she whispered, "I'm your mother." The room fell silent. Ethan froze, confusion flashing in his eyes. He looked at his adoptive mother, then back at Grace. "Mom," he said slowly, voice trembling. I don't understand." Grace reached out, her voice shaking. "I lost you. They told me you were gone. Your father, he tried to find you, Ethan. He never stopped." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. He took a step back, then forward, and finally, he let her hold him. For the first time in 18 years, a mother held her son again. "That bracelet, where did you get it?" The woman's smile faded. "It came with him, the day we adopted him." Hours passed like minutes. Grace sat with Ethan, telling him everything: the night of the storm, the hospital, the letter, the truth Edward had buried. Ethan listened in silence, his expression unreadable. Then, finally, he whispered, "All my life, I felt like something was missing. Like there was a part of me I couldn't name." He looked at her, tears running down his face. "Now I know why." Grace smiled through her tears, touching his cheek gently. "You were never missing, Ethan. You were just waiting to be found." Later that night, as she prepared to leave, Ethan's adoptive mother walked her to the door. She took Grace's hand softly and said, "I always knew he had another family somewhere. But he was loved here, Grace. I promise you, he never lacked love." Grace nodded, tears in her eyes. "I can see that. Thank you, for being his mother when I couldn't be." As she stepped into the night, the wind carried the sound of wind chimes, soft, haunting, and beautiful. It sounded like Edward's piano. Grace looked up at the stars and whispered, "He's safe now, Edward. You can rest." The sun dipped low behind the quiet suburban street as Grace stepped out of Ethan's home. Her eyes glistened, not from pain this time, but from something gentler. Peace. The visit had shaken her world, yet somehow, steadied it too. Seeing Ethan's stepmother, so kind, so full of grace, had shown her what love could become after heartbreak. As Grace walked toward her car, she paused by the garden gate. A wind brushed her cheek, almost like a whisper from David. For 18 years, she had lived in the shadow of a secret. Now, that shadow was fading. Flashback scene. 18 years ago, David sat in his study, holding 2 envelopes. One with Grace's name. One with a birth certificate, the name Ethan Michael Cole. He whispered to himself, "If I tell her, I'll lose her. If I don't, I'll lose myself." He placed both envelopes in the piano bench, the one Grace opened after his death. He never found the courage to speak the truth. As she looked at the sky, "David," she whispered, "I wish you told me. I wish I could have met him sooner." From the front door, Ethan stepped out, calling softly, "Grace?" She looked at him, tears falling freely now. "You have his eyes," she said, smiling through her grief. He nodded, stepping closer. "Mom always said he played the piano beautifully," Ethan murmured. Grace chuckled softly. "He did. Every night. The same song. For me." Ethan hesitated, then said, "I know it's late, but would you play it for me? Just once?" Grace nodded. They walked inside. She sat at the piano, David's piano, and placed her trembling fingers on the keys. The melody began, slow, haunting, filled with everything unsaid between them. The room filled with memories. Laughter. Regret. Love. Ethan stood behind her, eyes closed, listening. A single tear rolled down his cheek. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them. Not words, not forgiveness, but understanding. When the final note faded, Grace looked up. The house was quiet. the air soft. And for the first time in 18 years, her heart felt light. She whispered, "Goodbye, David. And thank you, for giving me another reason to love." As she turned to leave, a framed photo on the wall caught her eye. David, young and smiling, holding baby Ethan. A note tucked behind the frame read, in David's handwriting, "For the day she finally knows the truth." Grace pressed her hand to her chest. Her tears fell again, not of sorrow, but release. The piano's last echo lingered in the room. A quiet song of love, loss, and peace.